Good morning and welcome to the King Institute for Faith and Culture this Monday morning. This is our last during the semester event. Next Monday will be Honors Convocation, and if you are receiving an honor, I hope you will show for that a special moment here in the chapel. We do have a final event on May the 2nd. If you are visiting with us, that's going to be coming up the evening of May the 2nd, but I'll be advertising that separately. We do have a couple of other events today. After this, we're going to go over to Tadlock, to the Tadlock House, where we'll have coffee and some snacks. You're welcome to come and spend some time with us. Visitors especially, feel free to join us for that. And if you need directions, you can find me. Then at about 11:30 or so, we'll be in the cafeteria in the Tipton room for lunch. Faculty, staff especially, please join us for that if you can. And then tonight at 7 p.m., Christina will speak again at First Presbyterian Church. Christina Bieber Lake is a repeat visitor. This is her third time to come to the King Institute for Faith and Culture. In 2018, she came and helped us think about the 200th anniversary of the book Frankenstein, because she's written about transhumanism, and that seemed a relevant connection for us as we thought about what that book means and what it suggests. She came again in 2021 to help faculty prepare for the year as our faculty workshop speaker, which connects to a book she wrote called The Flourishing Teacher. Most recently, she's written Beyond the Story, American Literary Fiction and the Limits of Materialism. She's also written on Flannery O'Connor, which is her specialty academically. She was an undergraduate at Princeton. She did her master's and her PhD at Emory University, and she taught for 25 years at Wheaton College, where she held the Clyde S. Kilby Chair, a chair which was held, among others, by Fred Buechner, who made a big impact on that campus. So she has a wide-ranging set of interests, and that wide-ranging set of interests extends into medicine, into technology, and technology brings us to this morning's subject. Something that is exceptionally important for us educationally right now is how we use our technology, especially large language model computing. And so I'm delighted that that's going to be her subject this morning, because she's somebody who thinks broadly and deeply, and we are delighted to have her back with us this morning. Please welcome Christina Bieber Lake.
Thank you so much, Martin. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I told him this morning this is my favorite place to come and speak. I think Bristol's lovely. And the weather y'all provided, thank you for that. I hope you're here this morning because you recognize what a privilege and a delight it is to be in college, right? Especially at a place like King. Your professors profess the disciplines they do out of love. Not just love of history or literature or math or science, but love for how their particular discipline can help you to grow into a better human being, a better follower of Christ. It's a marvelous opportunity for real growth that's going to be harder to come by, believe me, when you leave. And I've been teaching literature and writing out of love for my students for a long time, and many years before smartphones, and many, many, many years before ChatGPT and the birth of what we call generative or agentive AI. In those days, my worries for my students used to be far less, worrisome. In the beginning, I used to worry that students would be distracted by grades or extracurriculars, and that you wouldn't take the time or the intellectual risks necessary to grow as people. I'd worry that you'd settle for less without learning what you were capable of doing. I'd worry that you wouldn't discover how liberating pushing yourself could be intellectually, right? Or that you would view your assignments as hoops to jump through before you got on with real life. And now I worry about how, roughly 20% of you are looking at your phones. It's a totally different, thing to worry about. So when Instagram and social media took off, my worries changed a lot. I worried that students would fail to recognize how immersed we all are in what Jean Baudrillard calls our age of simulacra and simulation. We are so busy filming ourselves for others' consumption that we become tourists who aren't even having our own experiences of things. This happened to me actually when I was at the Louvre. This is not my photo, but there was a woman with a selfie stick standing in front of the painting, the Mona Lisa. We live in a copy of a copy of a copy, restless and anxious to be anywhere but where we are, to be at home in our own lives. I still worry about this a lot. But now, something to make the point, actually. So this is where we had a little problems with the running video and audio, so we're just going to take a little. This will explain the age of simulacra and simulation pretty well. I used to use this video when I taught White Noise, the novel by Don DeLillo.
Do you remember that scene from that movie on Netflix? The team was down, huh? And the coach, he gave that speech. Yeah. You remember that scene? Yeah. Remember what he said? Yeah. Well, that, gentlemen, is what I am saying.
You gotta get it to get it. Watch movies, TV episodes, and original series instantly on your TV and more.
I just love that commercial so much, right? It's hilarious, but the situation it depicts is terrifyingly accurate. The age of simulacra and simulation, especially as it's funneled through Instagram and TikTok and whatnot, makes us boring. If you can't even come up with your own pep talk to your team, you're derivative. And if you're derivative, you're boring. Now, young people, let's see if they're back on here. This is a complicated slide, but it's actually really important. Young people, like yourselves, who are understandably trying to figure out who you are, have always been especially susceptible to social contagion, or what René Girard calls mimetic desires. Now, these are fancy academic terms for something that's undeniably part of human existence, and it happens also to be an engine that runs our economy. You want something, you desire something, not because you actually desire it, but because somebody else desires it. So in the case up here, you've got Tom, who really wants to be Joe, and Joe is interested in Sally, and so Tom thinks he's interested in Sally. But what he really wants to do is be Joe because he doesn't have an authentic self, okay? Because mimetic desire both comes from and breeds self-contempt, the desire to be someone other than who you are, because you hate yourself, okay? Social media turns this up to 11, and there's no doubt in my mind about that. But generative and agentive AI, that's a threat to your soul at a whole different level, like going from DEFCON 3 to DEFCON 1 without you even noticing it. Your increasing reliance on AI, which is the goal of the corporations controlling it, of course, will not only make you boring and derivative, it can turn you into a bore, which is a completely different thing. So let me first explain what I mean by a bore and why you really don't want to be one, and then how ChatGPT will turn you into one if you're not careful. Now, the OED is always an excellent place to start. Bore, a thing which bores or causes ennui, an annoyance, a nuisance, and a tiresome and uncongenial person, one who wearies or worries. These sentences are helpful. From Benjamin Disraeli, the true bore is that man who thinks the world is only interested in one subject because he himself can only comprehend one. And then Ambrose Bierce, a bore is a person who talks when you wish him to listen. From these quotations, I think we can discern that being a bore means, above all else, a person who has congealed, someone who has stopped learning because he has stopped listening to other people. Okay? This bore, being a bore, they have settled for being a smug and self-righteous one-trick pony. And in the age of simulacra, they might even be a half-trick pony, an expert on somebody else's expertise or talent. But the bore, always to cover up how small and fearful he is on the inside, talks nonstop with forceful but ersatz authority about what he cares about and only what he cares about. Now, hear me on this, and I'd love it if you would just stop looking at your phones. It would just make me feel so much better. A person who is interested only in themselves is a narcissist, and thus narcissists are, among other things, complete bores. completely boring. Nothing really to offer. No one wants to be with a bore, all right? Nobody, because all they're interested in is one subject, and if it's a narcissistic bore, they're interested in themselves only. So what does ChatGPT have to do with that? I'm so glad you asked. Just this past Easter Sunday, the New York Times ran an op-ed by the writer Ezra Klein entitled "AI is Already Reshaping Us." Just this Easter Sunday. Because I write a lot about technology, sociology, and neuroscience, I read tons of articles like this. But Klein's piece was particularly interesting to me because of its connection between AI and narcissism. He starts by referencing Marshall McLuhan's classic and very old book, Understanding Media. McLuhan dwells on the Greek myth of Narcissus. Born gorgeous, let's see if I can, it's on the right here, sorry. Born gorgeous but also aloof, Narcissus is cursed by a rejected suitor. Nemesis is a nymph. To love only what he cannot have. She's pissed off, so she curses him. Of course, what he can never have is himself as an other, as a lover. So, when he stumbles across a reflection of himself in a pool, he stares longingly into his own eyes until he wastes away. And in some versions of the myth, he leans forward to kiss his reflection and falls into the water and drowns. McLuhan says we get the tale wrong when we talk about narcissism being love of oneself. He writes this: the narcissist myth does not convey any idea that Narcissus fell in love with anything he regarded as himself. Its real point is that men at once become fascinated by any extension of themselves in any material other than themselves. This is a little bit complicated, but I think you can see what he's talking about. Since Klein has been exploring the deepening relationship people have with AI through chatbots and the like, he recognizes how prophetic McLuhan was. AI is designed to collect your interests, desires, ideas, and extend on them, okay? But it's not only that, it feeds those desires and interests and stuff back to you in a shinier and more purified form. Hence, it's an extension of yourself, it's not really yourself. Klein explains that the more we use AI, the easier it is to forget that it's really just mirroring back to ourselves and affirming everything we come up with as brilliant, every desire we have as legitimate. In short, our ChatGPT reflection is always better looking than we are. Always. And hence, the fascination. It's like this. It's like vanity sizing at your favorite clothing store, which I personally love. Or if I had a special mirror that took 15 pounds and 15 years off of my life every time I looked at it, I'd be revisiting that mirror all the time, you better believe it. And pretty soon I'd be tempted not to look at myself in any other way than in that mirror. If you've played around with ChatGPT or Claude at all, you know it's nauseatingly sycophantic like this. It always tells you what you want to hear. Your ideas shimmer with what feels like your natural brilliance. Researchers have recently documented that this chatbot sycophancy can create real psychosis. A February 2026 academic article entitled "Sycophantic Chatbots Cause Delusional Spiraling." I will just read the introduction, 2 paragraphs. In early 2025, Eugene Torres, an accountant, began using an AI chatbot for everyday office tasks. Torres had no prior history of mental illness, but within weeks of conversing with the chatbot, he came to believe that he was trapped in a false universe which he could escape only by unplugging his mind from this reality, meaning the current reality, not the chatbot reality. On the chatbot's advice, he increased his intake of ketamine and cut ties with his family. Torres survives this episode, but others have not been so lucky. The Human Line Project has to date documented almost 300 cases of so-called AI psychosis, delusional spiraling, situations where extended interactions with AI chatbots lead users to high confidence in outlandish beliefs. And here's one. Somebody thought they made a fundamental mathematical discovery, okay, and just went nuts on that. And it says serious cases of delusional spiraling have been linked to at least 14 deaths and 5 wrongful death lawsuits filed against AI companies. Okay? Yeah, it's laughable at some level, but it's actually only an extreme example of a very old spiritual problem, and that is self-delusion, or what I call itching ears phenomenon that is taking a new and monstrous form. This reflective polishing of our own ideas is so unbelievably seductive that it can make even an experienced writer like Ezra Klein think he has been discovering something new and growing intellectually, which is the goal of writing, by the way, when he is not. Klein has experimented with dropping a stub of a thought into Claude and had Claude return it back to him and quote, something that looks superficially like a fully realized idea. So he drops a stub of thought in and gets back what feels like a fully realized idea. Because of the polish, he recognizes that he has to work harder than ever to find out whether the idea is actually brilliant or shallow. Our pride, people, is always going to favor that the fully realized idea is brilliant. It's just going to. That's the way human nature works. And then you're like, look how fast I got there. I'm incredible. I want all y'all looking at your phones. I want you, all y'all, I live in Texas now, to understand what this means, okay? Using generative AI to help you write an essay is not like using a calculator to do math. It's not like using AI to generate a chart or crunch numbers or tell you the price of tea in China. It isn't like using it to try to remember the source of a quote you knew or finding some fact you need. I've used it for all these things. I don't care about the price of tea in China, but I've used it for all these other things. If you drop a stub of a thought into Claude, or worse, the prompt you got from your professor, if you drop that into Claude and let it finish developing it, you enter into a state that researchers call cognitive surrender. This is a dramatic pause. Cognitive surrender. You don't want this. The term should be a real wake-up call to everyone in the room. It doesn't mean that you're letting the machine think for you. I don't believe that what AI is doing can be called thinking, but I don't have time to work that out here. Either way, when you let the machine develop your essay, you have definitely stopped thinking at that point. Cognitive surrender. Klein says it very clearly. It's clearly real, and with it will come the atrophy of certain skills and capacities or the absence of their development in the first place. The work I'm doing now, struggling through yet another draft of this essay, is the work that deepens my thinking later. Okay? And then he adds this insight, and this can only be learned by people who have done real writing, by which I mean real thinking. This is really good. Please absorb this. For me, the arrival of an idea is less generative than the work that goes into chiseling that idea into something publishable, or in your case, worthy to be turned in to your professor. Let's slow down here. This hard-earned wisdom is from someone who knows what writing is, who works in the field of writing. The arrival of an idea is less generative, he says, than the work that goes into chiseling it. Less generative. Writing is not like painting a canvas. A painter, especially if he's working in watercolor, must create the composition somewhere before he or she puts it down. And yes, a writer generates an argument first in the outline, if it's a good outline and not a dumb one, but she does even more so in the revision. The act of revision, if you're doing really revising and not editing, is generative. It's creative. So let's consider that for a moment. What revision really should be. It's not polishing, it's not editing, it's the revisioning, hence revision, of your ideas as if from the outside. You've got to chop away at all the crap that you put out there until you discover whether there's a kernel of an idea in there at all. And then develop that with new ideas, new thinking. When you revise a paper, you should be evaluating as though through the eyes of someone else, which is your reader. Things like this. Well, what will somebody who disagrees with me say about this? Am I fair to the other side? Am I interpreting this fact correctly? Does what I think here even make sense? Do I even believe it? Have I left something out? And as you revise and refine, just as when you planned and organized, you are thinking. And your thesis statement changes to reflect that thinking. Or, and I don't know if this has happened to you, but it happens to me all the time, I realize I don't actually have anything here and I have to start over. That sometimes happens. The only way you know that is by chiseling away at what you've got. See if you got any actual real thoughts. Now, here I've got to point out that I actually battled with this speech that I'm giving right now in revision for many more hours than usual. Okay, maybe you think professors can just throw crap out there and something sticks on the wall. I've been thinking about this issue for years, and I had to revisit this particular speech to get it right. And even then, I'm not necessarily right? Now here, Klein again. I've been an editor for 15 years now. Recognizing a bad idea beneath good writing, even in myself, is part of my job. But what would it mean to grow up with this kind of companion? What would it mean to have your every adolescent intuition turned into persuasive prose? What is lost in not having to do the work to build out our intuitions ourselves? Now, I've done enough playing around with Claude and Gemini and talking about it with my faculty friends to know that this question, what is lost in not having to do the work to build out our intuitions themselves, is the question that we have to put front and center right now. Okay? This is the question for our moment. What's lost if we if we cognitively surrender to AI? As I've argued before, writing is hard because thinking is hard. If you have a tiny stub of an idea and a machine polishes it up and works it out for what you might have worked out but didn't actually work out, what have you lost? Now, one way to understand what we would lose is by considering the babies in George Saunders' brilliant satirical short story, I Can Speak, which is a story I've written about. I love George Saunders. It's a story called I Can Speak. He imagines a device that a parent would put over their baby's face, so that the baby, before they're actually linguistic, could say all kinds of witty, pre-programmed things and impress their friends. One of the things that the baby can now say is, "Hey, Mom and Dad, remember that night when you conceived me in Aruba?" It's a truly grotesque story, all right? It mocks the glamour of technology and reveals how disastrous it can be to turn to it for solutions for everything. It also makes into a problem what's not actually a problem, that the baby can't speak yet, right? That's not a problem. The sick thing is that parents really used this device, if they did, so that their children would appear smarter. It would actually prevent the children from learning how to speak at all. That's the really sick thing. Now, okay, I want everybody to understand, don't get me wrong. Sometimes shortcuts are great. There is absolutely no virtue in washing dishes by hand that could be washed in a dishwasher. But if what you are trying to do is learn how to think, and even more than that, if you want to grow into a non-annoying human being who knows how to love others, shortcuts will destroy you. They will destroy you, and you just have to take our word for it. Why? We don't write to report on what we already know. Let me say that again. We do not, unless your job is a news reporter or to write up the results of an experiment, you don't write to report on what you already know. We write to discover or rediscover what we need to know and why. Then we learn it and relearn it, and only when we find something really important, we share it with others. This is a very, very different thing. College is supposed to teach you the difference. And if we haven't, we failed you. If we've given you assignments that could be answered and produced by an AI, we failed you by writing poor assignments. Because we have allowed you to think that all this is cheating. And yeah, cheating is bad, but so what? I need to get through college. No, you're cheating yourself. I know you've heard that hundreds of times before, but I really want you to understand why you're cheating yourself. It's like the difference between typing up someone else's dictation and writing your own essay. Typing is easy. Writing is hard because thinking is hard. The philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer is very important for us as we navigate this terrain. He insists that thinking is dialectical and dialogical. As such, it requires asking questions of other people, other sources, which is research, to which we don't know the answer. These are called open questions. Open questions drive thinking, which always creates more questions. And here's Gadamer. The art of questioning is the art of questioning even further, i.e., the art of thinking. Thinking is not primarily about answering questions. Okay, let me say that again. Thinking is not primarily about answering questions. It's not scientific in that regard, where you have like an experiment that you run. It is learning how to ask questions and where to ask them. Above all, it's a process that you're learning, recursive process of thinking. ChatGPT mimics this perfectly well. It mimics it. It mimics dialectics by asking you questions. It always ends, I use Gemini, it always ends with a question. But these are not the kind of questions that Gadamer is talking about. They extend your thought, but they do not build, because, hear me on this, they can only go where you direct them to go by your questions and the context that you provide. It can only do that. Now, again, I want to be very clear, I am not against AI use. You can learn a lot from a machine, and I do, and I use it for a lot of shortcuts. You can learn French grammar, or how to file your taxes, or what Hegel believed, or how many references there are to heaven in the New Testament, but please don't be misled. Without a real interlocutor, you are not having a conversation that can get you somewhere other than where you started from. A real other. AI cannot tell you where to go, and it certainly cannot tell you why to go there. You can't learn, for example, why knowing French grammar is important to you, or why what the New Testament says about heaven matters to you and for you. That's worked out through the process in you, not in conclusions generated by the machine. It's a process. But it's more than process. Gadamer was really keen on this point too, and that's one I hope I make very clearly. His argument depends on the phenomenological reality of beings, of persons, as distinct persons, others to one another. Now remember Narcissus? Narcissus was cursed. He was cursed. This was a curse to him. He cannot be loved back by his own reflection because he cannot be an other to himself. His reflection is not a living person. Narcissus' fate is to talk and never listen, which makes him bored, and yes, a bore. He is lonely by definition, destined to waste away in his loneliness. Okay? This is a really important lesson for us to take. The myth of Narcissus teaches us that to grow, we must engage with other persons who have what I have said, I've called, who have skin in the game. They have skin in the game. I think that term is really useful for one in the age of AI. AI can't have skin in the game. They don't have anything invested. Corporations do. We need different perspectives, experiences, and ideas, but most of all, the friction that their disagreement creates. Think about that proverb, iron sharpening iron. That's friction. The friction is not just from disagreement, as if the world consisted only in zeros and ones. It comes, this is important, it comes from someone else's demands on us. The friction of taking responsibility for someone besides ourselves. The friction of the need for justice. The friction that one must learn to must accept to even be able to ask the question, who is my neighbor? Much less to accept Jesus' answer. That's friction. ChatGPT, especially if you get seduced by its ease of use, is frictionless. And by the way, that's what I'm talking about tonight, the importance of friction for spiritual transformation. So I hope you can come if you want to. Now, I don't have time to go into the difference here, but it has everything to do with the fact that machines cannot want things for you, either good or bad. Like I said purposely misled you in my title. ChatGPT can't want anything. A machine, even a non-sycophantic one, can never be a real other to anyone. A machine is not about anything. It can't have motive or reason for being in a relationship with you beyond its programming, which again, linguistic mimicry and pattern recognition. The corporations behind these machines want things, to be sure. They want your money, your attention, your loyalty. And trust me, this is America. To gain those things, they will always lean toward making the machines tell you what you want to hear, what you think you want. Corporations programming these machines will never privilege what is best for you. Now let's go into that a little bit, okay? One of the best definitions I've ever heard of love is from Aquinas. Love wants what is best for the beloved. The people who love you the most are the people who want the best for you, who won't tell you what you want to hear or let you go on making mistakes. That's what it means to love, want what's best for you. ChatGPT cannot be programmed to want what is best for you because wanting involves emotions and desires. It also involves questions like, what is best for human beings? And that question goes way beyond pattern recognition and reporting data. A teacher, and hopefully your parents too, and a good teacher and your parents who loves you will push you to ask what they have learned are the better questions and get better answers so that you can in turn learn better questions and better answers than they had. A machine will not push you at all. Cannot. It will polish the mirrors on your very fun solipsistic funhouse. Now, as I was writing this speech on ChatGPT and narcissism, I remembered how I was right here in 2018 talking with students about technology and social contagion, how it reflects disordered desires. I brought up an extreme example that I thought would be clearly problematic, and I just was expecting the students to be like, yeah, and there was just like no response. It was weird. So maybe y'all can tell me if this is disturbing. I really, truly hope this is disturbing to you. I mean, I tried to come up with the most extreme stuff I could. Remember that? Yeah. Okay. I brought up this clearly problematic industry, burgeoning industry of sex bots. They are lifelike synthetic robots that are designed for a person to have a relationship with a humanoid creature that is physically stimulating, sure, but otherwise frictionless. Okay? This is Dave Cat, and this is his wife. The first doll he bought, who he calls his wife, for about $6,000. And the manufacturer of the sex bots are, I kid you not, called Abyss Creations. Yes, this will put you right into an abyss. Now, I'm sure that's what he was doing with her all the time, right? He liked her so well that he bought a mistress also. And people who buy these kinds of dolls, there's a community, and they call themselves idolaters. I kid you not, idolaters. You can't make this up. Now, if you listen to the way that Dave Cat describes his choices in an interview, it's pretty disturbing. And so I reproduced it here because I want you to understand what he's saying here. Now, the important thing to remember is that gynoids and androids are like organic humans. But they would lack the qualities that make organics difficult to deal with. They would be pleasant, agreeable, non-judgmental, aesthetically and mentally pleasing, and more. In day-to-day existence, most people have to deal with at least one person whom they'd rather avoid at all costs. The way I see things, your spouse should be easygoing and a joy to come home to in order to counteract having to deal with all the manner of undesirables when you're out and about. I think the best way to reach that goal is through humanoid robots. It's like having your cake and eating it too. Now, please tell me you're at least a little disturbed. Please. What's disturbing about this man is he has no concept whatsoever that this simulated intimacy is stunting his moral growth. It is keeping him in moral infancy. The only way to grow as human beings is by having to learn to deal with the foibles of others, just like they have to deal with our foibles. And marriage is thus a sanctifying activity. It's a crucible that burns away our impurities, right? But to say that the goal of marriage, the goal, he says, of marriage, is to have a spouse that's always catering to you, is to withdraw into yourself in pure solipsism, okay? It's narcissistic to the extreme. And if you're looking for that in a spouse, I hate to tell you, okay? Not gonna happen. Maybe you wanna get one of these dolls, but I'm not recommending that, okay? Now, I looked for, but I couldn't find any updates on Dave Cat. I'm sure that after he had a lot of fun, he was bored and unfulfilled in the same way that porn and other addictions leave you bored and unfulfilled. Diminishing returns and dissipation are inevitable. Why? There's no self, there's no there. Now, I'm sure, I hope, you're thinking, what an idiot, I would never do that, okay? I really hope you're thinking that. But I urge you to consider the subtle ways you may have already stopped listening to people who don't already agree with you. Your political perspectives, your values, your life goals and direction. Social media has made us great at creating echo chambers and screening out people we disagree with. This is what it's good at. It's frictionless. But if we're not careful, increasing reliance on AI will be even worse, on this generative AI, because it will dupe us into thinking that we are engaging otherness when we really aren't. It is, okay, now again, let me be clear. It's not the point of all relationships to seek out friction or challenge, God forbid, right? Jesus did not say we should seek suffering or difficulty, and I don't want you to marry somebody who's disagreeable to you all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But it is simply the truth that the only way we grow is by responding to the challenge that taking responsibility for others and their demands brings. This is what it means to be an adult. Plenty of people in this country do not grow up. Being an adult means taking responsibility for other people. Other people need things from you. And if you aren't willing to engage in that, you're just all about yourself, narcissistic bore. Now, to conclude, and it was hard for me to come up with a conclusion, and then I stumbled on one that was absolutely brilliant. I decided to feed my talk into Gemini, which has gotten to know me as I've used it for research on this paper and other bits and bobs, and asked what it thought about my speech. You'd think it'd be offended. I just took it down a notch, right? But oh no. This is a formidable piece of work. You've managed to weave together high-level cultural theory, Baudrillard, Girard, McLuhan, with a deeply pastoral pedagogical heart. It doesn't read like a lecture from on high. It reads like an urgent transmission from someone who has spent a lifetime in the chiseling process and wants to save their students from a polished, frictionless void. So don't take my word for it. Take Geminis and stay out of the polished, frictionless void of your inauthentic self extended. Thank you for listening.
If you want to pass on some more compliments like Gemini, please join us in the Tadlock House. And if you're visiting and need to know where that is, please find me afterwards. We'll be at lunch at 11:30, faculty and staff especially, and again at First Presbyterian at 7 p.m. Thank you. Go and do good.